So when we work with Ben Plywood, just as a refresh, we work with a material, kind of like a composite material, and that has visually two properties. We have an inside and outside top veneer, and we have also all the layers. So basically we have to deal with two different textures. So for example, you can select a top veneer material and then a side veneer material. And specifically wrapping the side veneer material across, for example, these edges, that is really what's the tricky part in computer graphics. And that's to a certain degree also why, for example, I built this one flat, so I can then later easily unwrap it and then simply via a spline bend it into the shape I only need. Okay, perfect. So let's get started with the unwrapping. I will slice my interface. Let's go to the node editor and there, and here we will have the UV image editor. And this is currently kind of like my modeling part. So maybe sculpted backrest modeling. And I can't really use this one for the texturing the way I want because the thickness is created by the solidify modifier. So you can either apply the solidify modifier later if we want to add one, it's not going to be too much, or we simply make a copy of this one, M and maybe 6, so it's further away, and this one, for example, we call textured, and the solidify modifier I will apply. Okay, good. When I apply the solidify modifier, be careful that we will end up with this rather soft looking result. And again, that is because we do not have any seams here or loop cuts. So we can, for example, add some extra loop cuts if you want. And then we can, for example, we cannot just simply scale them apart because I think this is not going to work. Yeah, you see. So what we would have to do is we can select one, GG, move it up, select the other loop, GG, and move it down. So that works as well. And you see then this sharpens actually the edge. I, for the moment, however, will use a different approach. So I will select all those edges and then go to the transform properties and say mean crease. This is now actually for the subdivision surface creasing. And you see this way, it actually, we can start sharpening the edges. Just make it sharp, because later this, with this is bent plywood, along the sharp edge we only have a very small bevel. So now we can just add a bevel along only the angle, maybe 1 millimeter, and there we are. And if we want here, we can just add some more details to it, maybe 10 segments, 0.6, so it's nice and round. Okay, good. So unwrapping. As I said, we have a top face and a bottom face, and then we have the side view. So let me turn off the crease preview. So what I need to do is I need to select everything, and for example that with Control E I will mark as a seam. Okay, perfect. And now I have the problem like with the loop that goes around. How do I do this? And this is a really tricky task, but we always, because this is kind of like a continuous loop, we need to try to find one edge that will never show up in our renderings, where we could, for example, add a crease. And the main reason why I select, for example, this edge and then say mark seam is, well, I will never show my rendering from there, but I might show it from here. So I want here to have a nice continuous material flow. Okay. Let's move this one up to here, there. Okay. And let's create a material. So for example, we call this one wood, maybe wood veneer. And then we add the texture coordinate system. We can add the image texture, UV, go to there. And then in my case, for example, will select this one. Okay, there's my image. And if I switch to material, this is what I see. Well, I didn't unwrap everything yet. So in edit mode, select everything, press U, or inside shading in UV, select unwrap. Okay, good. So now you see the material on it. However, the material is not really oriented in the way how I want, and it's also not showing the correct size. So inside the UV editor, I press A, and then L and Shift L to select these two. Press R and 90, so they are rotated. And then I simply will scale this up, so I get more material of my texture mapped onto this part. I can make it bigger because then you see there's some sort of an ugly tiling happening. I can maybe stretch this a little bit, make sure it doesn't get out of the image area. But here's a funny thing. I can, in this case, stretch it over the horizontal area, because in case there is a seam, you wouldn't really see it because, well, the veneers basically will hide it. Now if I go this way, then you can see it, but this way you can't really see it. Okay, so there we can find kind of like the amount of texture density we like, and I will go with something like this. Perfect. So now I have the top area textured, but not really the sides. And when I go into edit mode, there you see there are my sides. And this is now a little bit of work what we have to do. But step number 1, we have to create a new material. So click plus and new, and for example we say wood sides or side. And this material now I have to apply only to this ring. And I assign this by simply selecting the geometry in edit mode, have my correct material selected, and then I say assign. And now there you can see that everything that defines actually the edge is highlighted with this white color. And that's basically there. Oh, I'm in texture mode. That's the reason why this was colored already. Perfect. Okay, see? And Now we would like to add the kind of like the layer texture to it. So here, first we can go open image. This time now we will select this one. And also here, image, go to there, please select the plywood edge, and then texture, coordinates, and UV. Okay. And the tricky task is now, how do we take a look at it, get this one to show up correctly. So see the mesh is not lined up correctly. So what we have to do is a little bit of cleanup work. So we can select everything. And in my case, I will rotate everything this way. Then I can select this point, cursor to selected, with B, draw selection, and then switch to pivot point to 3D cursor and rotate around it. There, perfect. Set this back to bounding box. And now, with B, I draw a selection, S, Y, and 0. Select with B the top, S, Y, and 0. So you see now I have the edges nicely lined up. And I think S, and I can straighten these parts a little bit. So then I can go ahead and quickly G and X, for example, try to align those edges a little bit so that they are nicely above each other. And the reason why I do this is simply, well, my mesh is actually built that way. So I want the unwrapping to be as close as possible to my mesh. So that when we later map the texture on it, it will fit. Okay, so A, R90, we rotate it, and now we have to do a little bit of trickery. I will simply put this one to a little bit there, and then S and X, stretch it out. Here, S and Y, at the bottom, S and Y. Okay, and now I will try to maximize the amount of pixels. So I could go to snap to pixels in UVs. And with everything selected, when I press G now, you see it snaps to them in there. The upper right corner and upper edge is aligned. I can select this, G and X, move this one over there, and select this point, cursor to selected, AA, switch to the 2D cursor this time, S and Y, and we scale, snap it down. Perfect. So now more or less we occupy everything of the texture. And if we go back, ta-da, you see a nice effect of the texture accurately flowing along the edges the way how it should be in real life. Now, you know how long this mesh is, and you also know how small actually the image is. So it's totally fake, but you see it doesn't necessarily matter that much because we show this rather from a distance. And even, for example, here, all we see are basically the lines, dark and bright, and there's maybe a little bit of color change on it. But we don't really see kind of like a wood grain like on the veneer. And that's why this type of an approach perfectly works. And if you pay attention to a lot of furniture renderings, you can see where people started to cheat or they didn't take care of that part accurately enough. And this is also an area where with NURBS, while it's very precise in terms of rendering, it can get actually a little bit more tricky to do that accurately, because you need to unwrap the different NURBS patches the same way, and that's not always so easy. Okay, so that's basically everything for how to unwrap then this flat sheet of wood and then create two different materials. So we have the top and bottom veneer, and we can see the layered bent plywood along the sides. So to bring this to an end, we have to take a look at the area here where we have this cutout. So when we zoom in and we turn material view on, and we see that actually that area is dark. That is not really what we want. So how could we give a texture to it? Well, the problem is this is an interactively created geometry. While in Fusion we have a timeline and every feature creates a tangible object we can work with, Blender, with its generative approach, does not allow us to do that, because the cutout is actually driven by this shape. But that's actually also where now the clue for that is. So I will select this object and I will set this to textured, and then I will give this a material, maybe wood boolean, maybe we could say side. Okay, and I will just give this a red color so you see where it is. Okay, and let's go to here. Now we add a new material slot, and into this one we load the wood side boolean, and you see instantly all the faces which are created by the boolean command will get the color from the boolean object. So, and that means if we now texture that boolean object correctly, we can then actually in the same way create basically the look we want with the bent plywood inside. Okay, so let's go back to this material. Same deal, and texture coordinates, image. Let's maybe say UV, or you know what? Actually, for the moment, let's maybe go object and there, and then we will select this plywood edge, and let's take a look how this looks. Okay, see, the orientation is not good, so let's go box. Yeah, also not perfect, so let's maybe go to the vector and mapping and see what we can do with the rotations here. That's probably one of the logical steps you would have to do. Maybe 90, and maybe let's say this one is 0. And yeah, this, for example, could work out actually. So not too bad. So the bevel modifier rounds it, and we can actually set the blend here to, whoa, we should not set the blend to something higher, because it blends actually from this face to this face. I actually only want it from that face to that face, but this actually is not too bad. But this bothers me here. You see, this looks very blurry, and that will later actually also show up here. And there are some other issues. Maybe let's turn on a little bit of light. Curious how in final rendering that looks, and it's still there. So this very basic approach here didn't really work out. So we have to use flat and UV. So that means this object now we have to texture. With the knife tool, actually this time I will use the top, because the top face is actually most times hidden from the camera. And then these edges, Control E, mark seam, AA, U, unwrap. Okay, we want to load inside the image editor also the plywood image so we can see it. And maybe let's go to material and let's take a look what we have. Okay, so let's press L and 90. So I set this one actually here to the bounding box. And is this all connected? Yes, it is all connected. Maybe I did not unwrap this. Ah, I missed one edge. Control E and mark and unwrap. Okay. Yeah, so this is now a tick better. AA, R and 90. Bring it maybe to there, and we can scale this up. Okay, maybe put this one to there, and these two maybe for the moment I put maybe to there. Okay, so let's take a look at our object here. Yeah, tick better, but not really perfect. So the problem is, as you can see, is, well, the texture here and on the Boolean object that don't really match. So I will Alt D, make a copy, escape, and then I move the copy up so I can see, for example, it next to the other object there. And then, because it's a clone, when I go into edit mode and I select all those faces, S and X, as you can see, I will adjust the UV unwrapping for both objects. And now I can try to find a scale till it seems, yeah, like this. This seems to be very similar thickness wise. Yeah, so this thicker and there very close. Maybe actually that was a tick too much. Maybe like this. Okay, good. Let's take a look. And that's a tick better. There is, however, one problem left. You see there and there are some distortions, and that unfortunately has something to do that we use the bevel modifier. If we turn this off, you see it's nice and clean. Before I continue showing you how to solve that issue, the second problem is also when we zoom in closely, you can look from here. So we can compare the bent edge and the straight edge. You see the straight edge has the wrong texture. Here the texture really shows the volume, and here it shows a different, more flat volume. The lines have to bend. And that's nearly impossible really to do accurately without a little bit of trickery. But the question is, do we need to show it? Most times we show an object from a distance, and as long as the camera doesn't really get as close, we might not have to do it. So at this distance, I think we can ignore that inaccuracy. Okay, let's deal with the bevel issue. This one, I will Shift D, make a copy, so not Alt D, and bring it over to here. And I would like to swap this Boolean modifier out, and then instead of using the old object, use the new object. I will move this one up. this one I will also set to carve, and the bevel modifier, the clamp, I will turn off. But before I turn the clamp modifier off, what I want to show you is there is a bevel now. So with this one turned off, it rounds actually the inner and outer edges evenly. So there and there. Perfect. Okay. So how do I fix the problem here with this bevel thing? Because this is actually quite annoying. So I found sometimes if I go in and, for example, delete this face and this face, you see now the texture is nice and good. Let's go back to here, but then this happens. Okay, if I go back and say you fill and you fill, you see it actually then does not affect, interestingly, the side veneer. And software, I hate you. Previously that actually worked in my last demo. No, it doesn't. Okay. I just wanted to have one quick check. Okay. Yeah, good. Let me pause for a second. And I already figured it out. So I have the carve library here selected, and with the B mesh, which increasingly should be the library you want to work with, specifically when we do volumes. There you see it all works now. Okay, perfect. So it was just the switch between carve and B mesh. In my previous test, I properly just had it set on B mesh. Okay, great. Now here when we adjust, for example, the edge rounding, you see then in here everything will automatically update with it as well. Nice. Okay, perfect. So now we solved the last texturing problem, the area where actually we do a Boolean cut.